are in the holy presence of God.
From the book of the prophet Micah. With what shall I come before the Lord, and bow before God Most High? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with myriad streams of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my crime, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? You have been told, O mortal, what is good, what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice, and to love goodness, and to walk humbly with your God.
And so we consider the calls before us today. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself.
Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one should make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all of the bridges we've made.
In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction.
And from Pope Francis' letter Fratelli Tutti. How important it is to dream together. By ourselves, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Let us dream then as a single human family, as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, which is our common home, each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions. Each of us with his or her own voice, brothers and sisters all.
And so as we continue or begin to embark on this journey of dreaming together and considering our time together over the next hour and a half, I want to give you a sense of what to expect, what the road ahead will include and entail. We'll be sharing a number of different grounding principles or lenses that we invite you to consider and that we'll offer for consideration as we enter into this time of conversation and dialogue. After which we'll have a chance to hear from a number of young Lasallian voices through our Young Lasallian Voices panel. We'll then go into conversation and breakout groups to reflect on what we've heard and also share our own experiences of this time. And then we'll spend some time processing as a whole group and consider how we can move from conversation to action. And after which we'll conclude our time together with closing prayer. And so as we consider our time together and consider some of the grounding principles with which we can approach this time, there are a number of lenses that we'll be offering for you. And one of those lenses that we offer for your consideration is the lens of the principles of Catholic social teaching. This lens, again, is one that we invite you to consider and approach our dialogue with. Catholic social teaching, a way to consider it is that these are kind of the social principles and teachings of the Catholic Church that invite us into how we can be in relationship with one another and in relationship with creation. These principles are not necessarily an addendum. They're not an addendum to the Gospels. They're a way of bringing the Gospels to life, considering the Church's proclamation of our salvation in Jesus. And this is Archbishop Lori's interpretation of what the principles of Catholic social teaching entail. So these principles are rooted in the traditions of the Church and are rooted in a number of different documents and encyclicals that have come from the Church. They can be summarized in 7 principles or 7 frames of reference. They're rooted in the fact or in the understanding that each person is a creation of God, and each person has dignity simply because they are and they're part of the beauty of creation. These principles invite us in considering how we can build a just world, and they're again broken up into 7 thematic areas. The first of which is the life and dignity of the human person. This is the foundational principle, and it's the principle upon which all of the other principles rest. The second principle is around the call to family and community. So this principle, again, speaks to the dignity of each person and recognizes that we are created for community. We're called to be in community, in addition to, again, recognizing the sacredness of each person. The third principle is around rights and responsibilities. This principle, again, speaks to the rights and responsibilities that we have for and with each other. It recognizes that a healthy community is one that upholds the dignity of each person, and these are the hallmarks of what it means to be in healthy community and communion with one another. One way to consider this principle of rights and responsibilities is that with the understanding that we belong to one another, we belong to each other. The fourth principle is around the dignity of work and the rights of the worker. This principle considers work and being able to work as taking part in creation. It upholds the rights of workers, and a hallmark of this principle is the understanding that economies are created for people, not that people are created for economies. The fourth principle is around option for the poor and the vulnerable. And this invites us to consider the lens of the preferential option for the poor, to keep ever present at the forefront the needs of those who are most vulnerable around us. The sixth principle around solidarity, again, invites us to consider our communal interdependence and interconnectedness with one another. And the seventh, care for God's creation, invites us to consider how we can ever care for our common home, how we can continue to take part in creation through caring for God's creation. And so these are the 7 principles, or a lens through which we invite you to consider our conversation and dialogue over this time period together. And with that, we also invite you to consider another way that you may look at these principles, another way that may be more familiar with you in our Lasallian Catholic tradition.
So moving from kind of the macro to a little bit more of the micro in our more immediate reality is just simply to be attentive to the call we have from our own mission, which obviously you are familiar with, you have lived and experienced very directly. And I want to offer it, though, through a lens of specifically this educational mission, the genius of De La Salle, St. John Baptist de La Salle, recognizing that we can live the gospel through the ministry of education. Education is a means of salvation. And so, can you for the first quote? And so, in the Brothers' Rule, there's two passages that I think speak to this. That the primary concern of our educational mission is the needs of those whose dignity and basic rights are not recognized. Right. So this call, this direct call we have, and where we place and where we move ourselves as a result of this mission, and how we seek to live it out in our own lives. And that by this mission, therefore, we're able to make it possible for those on the margins, for the least of our brothers and sisters, to live with dignity and as sons and daughters of God. And taking it to the next level, or the next call, is that in light of the gospel, therefore, that brothers and Lasallians always keep in mind the promotion of justice and the direct or indirect service of the poor. And so this, again, call that we have through our educational mission about responding to the needs of our time through this means. And so I think just kind of providing that lens for us as we move into our conversation, and as you hear shortly from your peers. And of course, I won't say a lot about this, you're very familiar with it, but obviously the language that you're very familiar around in terms of the core principles. And as I often say, what makes these Lasallian is that they're always seeking to work together. And that's what provides the Lasallian dimension, is that they're always hopefully working together in how we live out the mission. So just want to provide that lens and remind us of that call that we have.
And so at this time, we'll be transitioning into the next segment of our time together. And we'll be hearing from a number of young Lasallian voices. We'll have 5 panelists who will be a part of this conversation and sharing their reflections and experiences of the first month and the first few weeks of this year, sharing and reflecting in light of faith, service, and community, and again speaking to some of their experiences. Our panelists today are Evans Brackenborough from LaSalle Catholic College Preparatory in Milwaukee from the class of 2018. Zach Britain Ochoa from Cathedral High School, El Paso, the class of 2017. Trent Burke from De La Salle High School, New Orleans, from the class of 2020. Hannah Nguyen from the LaSalle Catholic College Preparatory class of 2020, and Olivia Connor from the 2018 class of St. Mary's College High School. And so with that, we'll welcome our panelists and again, invite them to speak to and share some of their own experiences. Thank you. And Evans, if you'd like to get us started.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to add a little about myself before I begin. And I'm currently an undergraduate student studying biochemistry at Seattle University. And I think first, it's great to see all these people here, people who are really here looking to have conversations that are tough, conversations that can be hard. It's difficult to be vulnerable in spaces where, maybe we don't know everybody, or we only know a couple of people. And so I think it's really commendable to have young people gathered together to have these conversations that are so essential and that impact so many people, if not ourselves, then many others. And I think for me, a lot of things in the world when I was younger felt very distant. They felt like it was another world sometimes when there was some injustice or some terrible thing happening in the world. It felt like, how can this be, the world that I live in? And I think that was so often my experience growing up, that when I started to, go out into the world and, experience it for myself, you start to see all sorts of things that you didn't imagine were possible, maybe in the shelter of your own home. And so I think as many of us are either voting age or approaching that age, these sorts of conversations and these sorts of topics become that much more important, because we have some say in, policies or leadership or things that can enact change in a very tangible way. And so I think while it may be hard to recognize, where we come from, the privileges that we have, whether that's going to, Catholic school, whether that's going to school beyond high school, just recognizing, where our identities and our privileges kind of coincide, it can be hard. And I think what's scary is, in spaces such as these, I often feel that maybe I don't have the best experiences or the most salient experiences for a given topic, but to recognize that that's okay, that it's okay to feel a little uncomfortable, and to recognize that maybe I'm not the best to speak on certain topics or certain experiences, because my identities are different than others. And I think when a danger of, conversations can be to lose sight of the humanity that everybody has, to lose sight of what unites us all as a community, and to lose sight of, that faith base. And I think it's very important then to, value the contributions of others, and to see, these folks have experiences that I may never experience, that I, because of my identities, because of my race, may never experience in my life. And so it becomes that much more important to then, listen and to really, take in the experiences of others and, value those. And I think, to wrap up, there's not a lot of spaces like this. I think this is a very unique time to have young people gathered together, willing to talk about tough conversations, willing to talk about the state of our world, the state of our country. And so I think, entering with an open mind, this is an invitation unlike any other, to really share space with people from across the country with varied experiences, and recognize that, this is a time where we can really come together as a community, as a larger Lasallian community. And so just want to thank everybody for being here.
Thank you, Evans. Thank you for sharing those words of insight, invitation, and speaking to your own experiences and perspectives as well. And so with that, I'll open it up to whoever would like to, whether it be respond to what Evans shared with us, and to then also share your own thoughts and reflections. From our panelists.
So, kind of going off of what Evan said, this is a very, very, very unique time in not only American history, but, Lasallian history in my mind, because we're coming off of the 300th anniversary of St. John Baptist de La Salle's death. And going into this past year, like in the celebration that we had over 2020, 2019, we did a lot of celebration and a lot of talking and focusing on what we as Lasallians can do to help grow the mission throughout the world. And then we went into the year that 2020 was, and everything that came with it. And to me, I don't think that was a mistake at all in my mind, because in 2020, we learned a lot about how we as Lasallians can go out into the world and talk with the community and live out some of the core principles that we did before, but we needed to even harder in 2020 and even harder in 2021 and the years to come because of the pandemic, because of the social unrest, because of the racial injustice. And then on January 6th, because of that, so there's a whole lot of things that have happened in my mind that have really shown the power not only of the Lasallian community, but also Lasallian youth. Because I've seen so many young people and so many young Lasallian people speaking out and raising awareness on things, just on social media, sharing little Instagram things on the Instagram story or Snapchat or Twitter, just to make sure that people are educated and aware. St. John Baptist LaSalle is about education. And even if we're not brothers or teachers or a part of the district, like in a official role, we're still a part of the Lasallian community, and we're supposed to live out that calling to educate people. So in my mind, like this past year or two, really year and a half, 2 years, whatever, has been a great time to be a Lasallian, because it's been a great time to really live out what we're called to do.
Trent, I think you're speaking to this idea of feeling empowered, and how important that is, right? To raise one's voice, to lead with both action and words. So thank you, Trent, for that. And again, our panelists, if you feel comfortable to jump in, feel free to do so.
I just wanted to add on to what Trent said about the importance of education and listening to other people. I work with a kid one-on-one as my job, and in his school, he's in 6th grade, and they're learning about microaggressions, and they're straight up just labeling things the way they are, and just straight up acknowledging the truth of what is happening in the world, no matter how ugly it may be. Because I just feel if we are so prone to deny the truth just to make the world prettier than it is, I feel that is more of an injustice than just straight up calling it out and straight up saying oppression exists, discrimination exists, and to move on from, not to move on from that, but to take that and take action towards it. And what happened on January 6th, I just think is so, I don't know, I was left with such disbelief, because it really shows the political divide in our country, so much so that it seems there's even multiple realities. One side thinks the other side is so ridiculous and so out there, and can't even see the truth. And I think that's one thing that we as a country and we as society need to work on, is just to straight up acknowledge what is true, even if it's not necessarily pretty in the way that we want it to be. And I don't know, one question that I had was just how can we create a better political environment? But not only that, how can we better encourage just compassion and service? Because I feel that's just been missing out lately in our country. And it's disappointing that we have these people attacking the Capitol. We have people putting their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. And I'm saying these things because I don't want to just skim over it and just say oh, this thing happened, because that's just the truth. There are people that are so fueled with hate, hatred, and violence, and I'm not really sure why. And I want to know why, even if it's the ugly truth. Yeah, so that's it. So that was kind of a rant, but yeah.
Not a rant at all. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for speaking to and reminding us of the call to address the challenges of our everyday realities, to lean into discomfort and risk and consider those as opportunities for continued growth. Thank you, Hannah. Olivia or Zach, anything you would like to add to the conversation?
I mean, I definitely want to echo just the importance of education. And, Trent said it so beautifully about how as Lasallians, our call really is to educate and to be educated and to continue to educate not only those around us, but ourselves. And in the last few years, you know, that's always been an important mission, but in the last few years, it's become increasingly evident how important it is for all people to be educated, for all people to have all the information that they need to make informed decisions. And I think, especially in the United States, our political climate has made it so that, you know, staying educated on an issue, on a person, on what's going on is increasingly difficult, because, you know, people are viewing truth in different ways. You know, the truth is now something that can be up for debate. And so I feel like that is, I don't know, it's definitely another kind of wrench in I don't know, my own understanding of educating and how to continue to grow is like, how do I figure out the truth? How do I not only stand firm in my own truths, but be open and willing to hear other people's truths? And yeah, so I think all of that is super important. I think the three of you guys said it really well. And I would also say, I mean, if we're talking about our political climate, I just feel like we've for a long time in the United States hidden behind politics and policy and all of that to mask kind of the bigger issues. And when we look at things like, oh, the left or the right, it is not divisive in the fact that it's one side or the other, but it's just like, it's a really easy mask to put on and say, oh, it's because they're Republicans, oh, it's because they're Democrats, oh, it's because they're liberal or conservative, or all these labels that kind of blur the truth and blur understanding of who we are as people. Because at the end of the day, we're all people, you know, and understanding what people need, what is it that we can do to help the communities that we're a part of and grow as people. And I think, you know, having the label of Lasallian is really nice because it's something to root ourselves in, a mission and a goal. But I definitely have found that like the labels of the sides and things just, I feel like sometimes make it even more difficult to have conversations, because there are these understandings of who are you if you have this label, and do you believe these things or these things? And instead of just coming, you know, like we're doing now, 1-to-1 or 4-to-5, you know what I mean? Like, and just having these conversations. So, but I think that, you know, the three panelists before me put it really well as well.
Thank you, Olivia. And I think I see the kind of the thread of listening, of truth, of coming together, and being open and honest in our dialogue. So thank you. Zach, I'm sorry, you were about to jump in.
I think that what you said was something, Olivia, that I really liked, was this talking about people as human beings and coming together as humans first, and not coming together or looking at one another simply by the labels. Because I think a big thing with unity, or something that is preventing unity from happening currently, is how we see ourselves through labels, and how we see ourselves as individual little tribes as opposed to members of a greater human race and as members of a greater creation. And I think that that is something that is terribly, terribly wrong right now with society, and that is missing. And then take, for example, the events that happened on January 6th. One group of people was pitted against another to the point where the United States Capitol was literally stormed, and certain people were threatened, lives were lost, all of it completely needlessly, because we were so caught up in the idea that our tribe was better, instead of looking at our shared humanity, which I think is something, it's a good place to start when we're talking about unity, because every single person, whether is a human being first and foremost, and while our experiences might not be the same, we can look at our shared humanity as a starting place to better understand one another and to better build community and overcome these differences that are currently creating the climate with which we live in and are leading to all of these types of events.
Thank you, Zach, for speaking to and reminding us of the sacredness of our humanity, and the need for us to reconnect to that in our understanding, and as we approach dialogues like this and everyday interactions. Is there anything that any of our panelists would like to add, any additional reflections or thoughts to offer?
just have one last thing that I had thought about while Zach was talking. Um, for me, one of the biggest, I wholeheartedly agree that like a lot of times we do look at each other as labels and not as people first. But sometimes I always think about this because there's the idea when it comes to like racial inequality and discrimination of I don't see color, or I don't see you as this, I see you as a person. But a lot of times our tribes have meanings that are very unique and help build us as a greater human community. Where I know a lot of people, especially in the Black community, it's like, I'm Black first, because that's what you see first. And it's had a huge impact on my human experience. A lot of people in the Hispanic or Asian community feel the same way. And even people in the white community feel the same way because their history or their impact as a Italian American or an Irish American or a Greek American or whatever has had a huge impact on who they are as people. But I think where we lose that nuance and that uniqueness in labels is in things like politics or things like that, because they're made up, they're man-made, they're not something that is truly special about us. I hate to say this, it's a difference in ideological belief, and it doesn't right away, different things like Olivia said, like doesn't right away the bigger issues that you're reinforcing, like racist beliefs and different things like that, that push society back and push us back further as a human race, where that's when the labels become toxic and don't have any value anymore, really. So I just wanted to add that in.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Trent. And thank you to each of our panelists, to each of you for your sharing and for giving voice and witness to your own experiences and sharing some perspectives to set us up for this next phase of our time together and for the conversations that will be taking place. Again, thank you to our panelists. And so as I touched on and mentioned when we were taking our roadmap of our time together, there'll be a number of a time for conversation in our breakout groups. So before, we'll spend some time in 4 different groups, 4 breakout groups, and there'll be a facilitator in each of those groups. But before we enter into that time of conversation, there are a couple of things that we want to, guidelines or principles that we want you to keep in mind as we enter into this time of dialogue. So I'll turn things over to Brother.
Yes, are they on the slide, Kanina, or, yes, thank you. And I would also put, I just had copied and pasted them onto the chat box so y'all have them. And again, I think our panelists reminded us of sort of being okay with not knowing, with being some of maybe our own at times being uncomfortable. But I think just these general principles, which I know you all bring to the space, but just sort of wanting to learn, wanting to understand, practicing the self-focus, like, here's what I think or how I've experienced this. It's okay, of course, to disagree, but to avoid blaming or shaming. Practice both and thinking, and then kind of, again, lean into that discomfort, take risk as you seek to understand, seek to honor different realities and experiences, and then, seeking to keep confidentiality as we have in those discussions. So just some things, as I'm sure more than anything, they're reminders, because I know you come with this in mind.
Our group talked about a lot of different things, and kind of really exploring what it means to deconstruct identity, but also to use our identities to our advantage, in particular our Lasallian identity. And Brother Chris kind of posed this question to us about where do we go from here? And I brought up the idea that, like, that question is often asked at the end of a lot of our Lasallian activities, LSL, LYA, all those kinds of things. And sometimes it can feel really difficult to make a plan or make something that feels tangible and feels possible, you know, to go back to your high school and teach your whole school about, I don't know, mass incarceration or something, sometimes feels a little bit impossible. But we were talking about how untapped, I think, the Lasallian community can feel like, especially once you leave your Lasallian school. But you know, Emily brought up this idea, like, you know, just having conversations like this once a month or a few times a year, you know, the more that you have them, the more different people will show up, and you'll have all different kinds of conversations. And you know, for me, even just having this, you know, hour conversation has rekindled my desire to keep in touch with my Lasallian family. So I think just the importance of continuing to have conversation. It's not always like, now we're going to do this, this, and this. It's just like, let's open the door so that we can keep moving forward.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Olivia. Anyone else?
I can share. Hi, my name is Emily. For those of you who don't know me, I went to LaSalle, Pasadena, and then I continued my Lasallian journey at St. Mary's College of California in Moraga. It's been a long time, not a long time, it's been like 6 months since I've been a part of something that's been Lasallian, and I really missed it. And so I'm really happy to be here. I didn't know what this Zoom call was going to be about. My dad had forwarded me an email from Kanena suggesting I attend. And so I did, and here I am. And I think these conversations reminded me that talking about social justice and talking about how we feel about things and how we can help with social justice topics shouldn't be as taboo as sometimes that they feel like they are. And I got my BA in elementary education. I'm teetering between if I want to teach in public school, but also being here reminded me that I miss being in a Lasallian classroom. So figuring that out, but also reminding myself that I can have these social justice conversations in my classroom, and that they can be formed to be age appropriate, that you shouldn't have to wait till someone's 5th grade, middle school, high school to talk about racial issues or identities, that if you pose it in a way, you can have that conversation with someone who's in 1st grade or kindergarten. So I'm really glad that I ended up coming today, because it just furthered my thoughts and ideas about the kind of classroom that I want to have. So thank you to the panelists and everyone who shared, and I'm very happy right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Any additional thoughts?
I just had something real quick. Kind of along the same lines as what Emily had said, being outside of a Lasallian school, even though it hasn't even been a full year yet, barely even like 8 months for me, I did miss it, you know, just being able to have that same connection and like the little things, like since I haven't been able to say, you know, live Jesus in our hearts forever with a group of people, I wear it on my wrist literally every day, 24/7, nonstop. Wear it with suits, wear it to random events, everything. Like I just always have it on because of that special connection that I have with the Lasallian community. And this helped a lot because I've been missing that. And I've been like, dang, how can I get back? How can I get back? Right before the Zoom started, I was about to go and fill out the collegian registration thing. So like all of that. And this being back here has really helped me realize the importance of, you know, a community like this, because it's a special thing to be able to have these conversations with the religious, especially because a lot of times people don't feel like the religious are open to having these conversations. But something very special about the Lasallian community and the Lasallian brothers to me is the openness to conversations about everything, controversial, non-controversial, life, you know, just everything. And I've been telling my friends about the Lasallian education, how it's just like so special, the best religious order out there. You know, like literally, I went on a rant for like an hour on FaceTime with my now friend group at college, before we got on campus, like, yeah, this is what it is, da da da. And I went in depth. Like I gave them full St. John Baptist School South history and everything, just because I was like, I missed it. And it was something that I really can't wait to get back involved in because of just how open and honest these conversations have been.
Thank you, Trent, and thank you to to each of you for your presence, for your sharing, for being willing to have that that conversation. And so, in the spirit of continuing the dialogue and continuing the conversation, and to stay true to the tradition of what will we do, or what comes after this, that we want to spend some time considering and inviting you to share and offer what you consider as some concrete actions that concrete, or things that are still emerging, or the next question, the next right question for us to consider as we go from here, as we go from this first conversation and time together. And so with that, I'll open it up for anyone who would like to share, who would like to pose a question or offer anything. And Brother Chris, I'm not sure if there's anything you would like to add as well. So go ahead and open it up without feeling the pressure of that you need to have a rollout plan of what comes next.
I think something that you guys should definitely keep in mind, especially during school, is joining the Lasallian volunteer program after you graduate, because you're definitely going to have a lot of these different dialogues, the same dialogue that we're having today. And also that can be a source of action in how we're able to educate the youth and still change lives. So FYI.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Any additional thoughts, Brother Chris?
Can you remind me, are we sending a survey out after the call or after the event? Are we sending a survey out?
We can do it now, or
Yeah, the reason I asked is I'm wondering, so I think one of the things is if we hopefully are able to find ways to reconnect in this way, what are the kind of topics that you would like to see as part of those conversations? What are the things that you're dealing with? And so I think just if you have suggestions now, feel free to put them in the chat box about topics or themes. And then if there is a follow-up survey, we can hopefully take it in, or emailing Nana or Katie, I think would be great.
Absolutely. Right. So again, continue to ponder that, that question and that invitation, and also keep an eye out and look to the survey that you'll be receiving. With that, are there any, I guess, closing thoughts or final things that anyone would like to offer before we begin to close our time together?
One thing I want to add is that we actually talked about in our group, that our Lasallian identity kind of carries on with us wherever we are. A lot of us shared important times where our Lasallian identity kind of came up. And one story I shared with everyone was how last year during this time, I was actually sitting abroad in Barcelona, Spain. And as I was walking through the Gothic Quarter, I saw letters that said LaSalle. And I was so intrigued that I was like, I had to go back and look at it. And I was like, LaSalle in Barcelona, Spain? What are you talking about? And then I saw little kids literally lined up and going into class. And I was just so happy and just realizing that my Lasallian identity just carries on wherever I am. So I felt passionate enough to join and volunteer, not at Lasallian school, but helping a family with a kid that couldn't, had it's called implants, and I was talking to him in English and having dialogues, but just understanding how our Lasallian identity kind of carries beyond us and just kind of follows us as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone, to each of you for your sharing and your presence, and for that willingness to continue to remain connected to your Lasallian identity and how we can continue to inform how we respond to what's happening in our world today and in our different communities. And so with that, we'll go ahead and begin or continue with our prayer. And so at this time, we've had an opportunity to talk about a number of topics, to share our experiences and to process in response to what we heard the panelists say. And as we consider all that has been said and maybe what hasn't been said and what we may be carrying, what you may be carrying in your hearts, we invite you just to take a couple of moments to consider who and what you would like to pray for this evening. So if there's a person, a place, a situation, anything that may be on your mind and heart, take some time to ponder that at this time. And if there are any intentions that you would like to add to the chat, a word or phrase that's present to you at this moment that you would like to add, we invite you to add that to the chat at this time as we continue in reflection.
I'm not sure if the audio level is checked. We can't really hear the music.
Thank you. All right, let's try that again. And so for the intentions that we carry in the silence of our hearts, and those intentions and words that are included in our chat, we pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayer. And we close with a prayer for our times. Compassionate God, you call us to love and to be loved. You see beyond what our eyes, hearts, and minds at times cannot or will not. You desire that we live as brothers and sisters. Our ways are not always your ways, and yet your faithfulness remains. In this time of uncertainty, may we use our lips to seek dialogue, our eyes to offer a gentle gaze, our ears to listen with heartfelt compassion, our hands to offer a hope-filled embrace, and our feet to draw closer to one another. Lead us, Lord, lead us to do justice and to love goodness and to walk humbly. Lead us, Lord. Amen. Saint John Baptiste de La Salle, pray for us. live Jesus in our hearts forever. Again, thank you all for your presence this afternoon and this evening. Again, and once you receive the survey, we definitely invite you to share with us your perspectives, and if something comes to mind as a way of continuing where we can go from here, you definitely feel free to reach out as well. So thank you. Thank you.